Hi. You want to learn how to solder copper pipes? Well, you're in luck, so stick around because that's what this video is all about. What does it do? So, soldering copper plumbing. It's a skill, but it's a skill that's fairly easily mastered. And to make it a lot easier, I'm going to give you a whole bunch of tips and tricks and secrets to doing a good job the first time. But first, before we get to the fun stuff, we've got to talk about tools, because we've always got to talk about tools. Really, the proper tools will make the job go easier, and you'll do a better job. So, the first thing we're going to talk about is heat. You need heat to solder. In the good old days, before lead-free solder, you'd use one of these, a propane torch. Well, take this out to your shed, use it for starting the bonfire, because it's not hot enough for lead-free solder. It was barely hot enough for leaded solder. Instead, the first secret I'm going to tell you is to get a mapped gas torch. I'm going to, since I don't have a cameraman, he can't zoom in, so I'm going to walk closer. This is a mapped gas torch. I've had this one for like 30 years. It doesn't have a fancy trigger on it or anything, but it works great. Buy a good one. Don't go to the 99-cent store for this. Buy a good one and you'll avoid the very pleasurable experience of having one burst into flames in front of you. It's a one-time investment. One thing about the torch, you might get a torch that has different tips. A couple of things about these tips. The first thing is, the tip, which screws into the torch, has a little O-ring on it. Those O-rings do deteriorate. Make sure the O-ring is good. You can get replacements at the same wonderful place you got the torch. You just need your credit card. The second thing about the tip is, don't use the tiny little smallest tip thinking, oh, that's so precision and fine. You don't want to do that. You want a big honking flame for soldering copper pipes. This is about a 1/2-inch tip, and it's just about right for 1/2-inch and 5/8, 3/4-inch pipe. Materials. Of course, you're going to need some materials, and the first thing you're going to need is solder. Back in the good old days, solder was made with lead and tin, and we put it on our copper water lines, and we were all consuming lead. That wasn't a really good idea, and it had its effects. So you cannot use leaded solder anymore on water lines. It's against code, it's against the law, and it's against common sense. Instead, we now have lead-free solder, and in fact, that's the only thing you're going to be able to buy at the big box store. So get yourself some lead-free solder. Get the 1/8-inch diameter, which is sort of the thick stuff, and buy a big spool of it. It's much easier to hold on to. You don't have to work with dinky little things. You can keep your hands farther from the heat, and you'll have enough to solder the pipes in your new mansion once you start building it. The other thing you'll need is the magic ingredient, flux. Flux is our friend. Can you tell where the microphone is? Flux is absolutely positively necessary for any kind of soldering. Copper oxidizes. You heat it up, it oxidizes much faster. Well, solder doesn't stick to oxidation. So as you go down to the big box store, you're going to spend 20 bucks and you're going to get all situated for plumbing here. Get a big can of flux, and while you're at it, pick up a little pack of these brushes. They're actually called flux brushes. They're also handy for glues and for putting on makeup. If you've got a really small kitchen, you can use it to sweep the floor. Get a brush. There is no other way you can actually put the flux on the pipes. Other tools we need. Cleaning is very important. These are cleaning tools. They're not very expensive. This is a brush to clean the inside of a pipe. We'll show you how to do that. They're sort of handy. They're made in different sizes. You have to get the size that matches the pipe you're doing. This one's for 1/2 inch. This is to clean the outside of the pipe. it's actually pretty useless. But if you're going to have all the tools, you know, a couple of bucks, and you're going to have this, sometime you might want to use it. Other tools we need. Well, you need something to cut the pipes. And that something is a pipe cutter. They come in different sizes, from little itsy bitsy ones to the industrial strength variety. Well, I wouldn't suggest getting the industrial strength variety. These little ones are really handy, and I'll show you how to cut pipe here in a minute in this video. But they get into tight places. They're really handy around the house. But the one you're going to normally see is this size here. This will handle up to maybe 3/4 inch pipe. I'll show you how to cut the pipe before you solder it. But anyhow, get a halfway decent one. Spend a couple of extra bucks. Don't go to the 99-cent tool store, because what will happen is the first time you crank down on it, it's made of pot metal, it's going to break, the threads are going to strip, and if you're laying on your back in 20-degree weather in the crawl space of your house trying to cut a pipe, that's going to take you off. Spend a couple of bucks, get decent tools, they're a one-time investment, and you won't have to do it again. And finally, a couple other minor materials you're going to need. You're going to need some 150 grit sandpaper to clean the pipes. We'll get into cleaning quite a bit. Or some 150 grit emery cloth. Doesn't matter. And you're going to need, another secret, a wet rag. Okay, we're ready to solder some pipes. Almost. Okay, first of all, point out I put on my much dorkier safety glasses because I do believe in that. I like my eyeballs. I would wear some kind of eye protection because solder does spit and sputter and drop around, and again, it's going to find the biggest thing it can hurt, which might be your eyeballs. The other thing is I'm going to be soldering this in a vise with dry pipes. It's much easier than standing on your head in a basement, you know, with a leaking pipe above you. But note I said dry. When you're trying to fix pipes, the slightest amount of water that's left in that pipe will keep you from doing a good job. It's going to leak if you can solder it at all. The water or the moisture just draws the heat off too fast. It creates a cold spot wherever it's touching, and it's going to leak. So you got to get the water out of the pipes. Poking a piece of bread in the pipe, you know, to stop the water, and then it dissolves and runs on down. Just however you do it, you've got to drain the pipe. This is much easier, and I do suggest if you're doing a plumbing job and you have a section that you can bring out to your workshop and clamp in the vise and build up that section and then insert it where it belongs. It's a lot easier. You'll do a nicer job. It's the way to make manifolds and things such as that. Okay, let's get on to soldering. First, we've got to find some pieces to solder. I want to point out something right here, although this is getting into plumbing. When the pipe fits into the fitting, it has to go in quite a ways, about 1/2 inch. When you're measuring your pipes, you want to allow for that because it's actually going to go in there about that far. And it has to go in all the way. They're designed for that entire contact. And that brings up another point. Don't cut your pipes with a hacksaw. No matter how hard you try, you're going to end up with an angled cut, and it won't be flush, it won't fit all the way into the fitting, and if it's not all the way into the fitting, you're not going to get a good solder job. Cut them with a pipe cutter. We're going to cut this one here. Simply put the pipe cutter over the pipe wherever you've decided you need it cut. Clamp it down a little bit firmly, not too firmly, and rotate it around. Every time you rotate it, and this pipe's short enough I can rotate the pipe, give it another tiny little crank. So especially when you're starting out, don't give it too many cranks. Just sit here and work it for a while. It just takes a few more seconds, but you'll eventually just a crank, a couple of turns, another tiny crank, a couple of turns, and eventually you'll get through it. Now, of course, as you cut more and more pipe, you'll learn, how many cranks you can have. Actually, it varies a little bit with the pipe cutter itself. So anyhow, we're going to cut off this end here, but don't go too far. Okay, once you cut it off, you pick it up off the floor, and now we've got two pieces of pipe we're going to join together with solder. Oh, isn't this fun? You notice when you do cut the end of it, first of all, there's a burr inside of it. That's what that little thing is on your pipe cutter. Go in there and womp it around a few times. Remove that burr. You'll also notice that as a natural consequence of cutting the pipe, there's going to be a slight raised end on it right here. Normally you can get rid of that with the next step, which is cleaning it. Just be aware of that. Okay. The most important secret, right after the torch and everything else we've talked about, the most important secret is cleaning. Dirty pipes will not solder. Copper oxidizes. You can see this pipe has been sitting around for a while. It's pretty well oxidized. This end is pretty easy. Just wrap some sandpaper around it and clean it up. And when you think it's clean enough, clean it a little bit more. Don't skimp on this part. The cleaner you make the fittings, the better a job you're going to do. When you think it's clean, clean it a little bit more. Now the inside of the pipes is this is an L fitting. It's a little bit more difficult. We've got this little brush. You can stick it in there and turn it around and clomp back and forth. The other way you can clean the fitting, see that didn't do real good, is to just take a little piece of sandpaper, and actually as you go through your project, this gets easier because the sandpaper gets a little bit moist and more pliable, and stick it in there and clean. Clean, 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 clean. Take the time to do the cleaning. The more you clean, the better your joint will be. Okay, this is exciting. We're almost ready to make fire. Okay, once you've got it together, I'm going to clamp this in the vise. Hopefully you can see what's going on. Okay, well I stopped and had my cameraman, me, zoom in a little bit, so hopefully you can see this a little bit more. I'm going to clamp our pipe in the vise here, and so far we're just going to put an elbow on the end of this pipe. So now we come to the biggest secret. Flux. Flux is absolutely necessary to soldering. It's sort of like a primer. What it does is when you heat it up, it removes the oxide, the oxidation that forms on the copper. Don't try and solder without flux. It's not going to work. So we use our little artist brush here and put lots of flux on that. Put some flux in here. Use lots of flux. That's why you want a big pot of it. And put your fittings together. Make sure that the fitting goes all the way onto the pipe. Again, it should be about 1/2 inch. You want it to bottom out in there. That's the secret to these fittings working. Okay, finally, after all of that, we get to use fire. So let's light the torch. Now, what I'm going to do, and this whole process takes about 5 or 6 seconds, is I'm going to use the torch to heat the fitting, not the pipe. I'm going to work it around the fitting to get the heat evenly distributed around there. I took my solder roll, I unrolled about 6 inches of solder. Now this joint is only going to need maybe 3/8 of an inch of solder. Doesn't take a whole bunch. I'm going to heat up the fitting, and after about 3 seconds I'm going to test it over here to see if it's hot enough to melt the solder yet. You want to touch the solder to the side opposite where the torch is. You don't want the torch melting the solder, you want the fitting to be melting the solder. We'll probably have to heat it a little bit more. Once it goes, then I'm going to lay a little bit of solder in there. You'll see the solder actually gets wicked up into, sucked up into the joint itself. It's an amazing little process, but works very well. Okay, let's go ahead and light our torch. Open the gas a little bit. Now, I don't recommend lighting a torch with a butane lighter. If that flame hits the plastic lighter, we're going to have a bit of an explosion. So, enough said. I'm going to have my rag here close by. Okay, I'm going to heat the fitting. Move the torch around. Again, you want to heat the fitting, not the pipe. You want the whole thing to be warm. We're going to check it here by touching the solder to the side opposite the torch. It's not hot enough yet, so we'll keep on heating. Okay, there it's hot enough. I'm going to get solder into all of that, and then I'm going to take my rag and wipe it off. Doesn't do much for the joint, but it makes it look a lot nicer. I got most of it. Except for that ugly little spot right there. Anticlimax. Like most things, 90% of the work is the preparation. So, there you go. Finally, as sort of a review, I'm going to stick another pipe in here, and we'll finish the thing. Now, of course, if you got a bunch of fittings, you know, a series of them, you can do all the prep work for all of them first. When you do solder them, solder one joint at a time. Don't try and do the whole fitting at the same time. Okay, let's remember our cleaning. The more cleaning, the better. Take some sandpaper here. Clean the inside of that. Since I'm not on a factory floor, I'm taking a couple extra seconds to make sure it's going to work good. Clean this pipe. And our flux, lots of flux. Stick it in there. We'll make sure everything is oriented where we want it. Make sure it's all the way in there. Okay, I'm not going to talk, because talking just makes it harder for me to function. So we're just going to solder this fitting and go from there. And that's how you solder copper pipe. Again, it's an anticlimax. When you clean it off, and again, if you take a little effort, you got to do it quick, but it makes a much nicer looking joint. Try not to wiggle the joint. You don't want to move anything. You just a really light touch to clean it off. And that's how you solder copper pipe. Thanks for watching. Have a wonderful day.